Hi, everyone. It's good to be here with you today. I hope everyone watching this is safe and sound wherever you are. My name is Robert. I'm lead UX specialist at Tiger Spike Dubai. And before anything, I would like to thank Rami and Noha, the founders of Mina Startup Summit, for giving me the opportunity to talk with you today. And I would like to also thank my Tiger Spike team, without whom I wouldn't be here with you. Let me start with a quick intro about myself. Well, unlike what my name might imply, I'm actually Egyptian, born and raised in Cairo. And I started my career back in 2006 as a software engineer, working with some tech companies and startups straight after uni, up until 2011 when I left to Dubai to work with one of the government authorities over there. Back then, I was fortunate enough to be passionate about user experience design and anything design in general, and that UX industry was starting to pick up. So I decided to make that switch, and I worked in a couple of places up until 2015 when I was fortunate enough to join my team at Spike Dubai. And I'm still with them up until today, and hopefully for many years to come. Spike, in a nutshell, it's a digital services company. We are specialized in business transformation, strategy, user experience design, and user-centered design practices. Um, I was fortunate enough during my career with Spike and before that to work closely with many corporates, many leading brands, whether for a few months' time or few years' time. I was trying to pick up some patterns and some myths and misconceptions that my clients and my teams that I work with are having. And sometimes those misconceptions are becoming somehow blockers to the way we do work. And one of the patterns that I picked up was that in the design sphere, we keep blaming and frowning upon our clients for not doing enough user research. And I think that has to stop and that has to change. The reason is, I believe we are part of teams, right? We are being put there for a reason. And one of the reasons is we should promote and evangelize our user research practices, why we're doing what we're doing, what's going to happen when we do it, what's going to happen when we don't do it. And that goes under the umbrella of client management and team management. And it's very important for us to defeat the assumptions and validate those assumptions in people's heads. One of the things that I read, and it was one of the best books that I read about client management, was Mike Montero's "You're My Favorite Client." I can't recommend this book enough. For anyone who deals on constant basis with clients and with stakeholders and wider groups, I think it's a winner for you. So back to the top 10 user research myths that we have on our hands today. It was not easy. It was quite tricky to dim it all down to just 10 misconceptions. Um, some of them are going to be repeated. You've heard them before. Some of them might be new. Some of them might be touching a nerve for many of you. I think it's not only for UX designers to hear this talk. I think it's for everyone in teams that uh, build products for actual users. So let's start with the most common one. User research is optional. Um, well, some companies think that researching with users is a bonus and a stretch goal, or maybe just a nice to have user story sitting in the backlog. However, user research is really necessary for survival. Case in point about that is Google Glass. Google, for example, came up with this product, and they didn't necessarily do a lot of user research. They didn't find out a real problem to solve or a real need to satisfy, but rather they came up with this idea: let's do a Google Glass kind of product, something that does exactly like the mobile phone does. So they added many features that the mobile phone is already doing, like notifications, maps, calendars, and most of all, they added capturing videos and photos. However, if they did proper user research with real people, they will find out very quickly, though, that people are concerned about their own privacy. They concerned with their data and what happens when people take photos random. People might take photos of them or videos with them of them, and that was the killer for that product. Um, Google Glass didn't survive much after it went live because of that user need. And it was directly banned from many public places, almost everywhere. It was banned from hospitals, from banks, definitely from cinemas, um, even banks. They got banned from everywhere. And if Google or the Google Glass team was a startup, they would have joined the graveyard of failed startups long ago. And that's why user research is very important for survival. The other reason why user research is not optional is that user needs are constantly changing. A case in point is WhatsApp. Um, so it's our beloved messaging app. And up until the time they introduced voice notes, we didn't even know that we needed that feature. We were constantly using the app and we were happy with just text messaging. However, the WhatsApp team, they understood that there is an underlying user need for sending voice notes. They have seen it happening in the voice machine days, the answering machine, and also in the voicemail in our phones. So they went on and they developed this feature and launched it, and it was a success. However, they didn't stop there. They recognized that user needs are evolving. So they kept doing usability studies and testing for that feature, and they found out quickly that people send longer notes. And that's why they introduced slide to lock feature for more hands-free recording. They could have stopped there. They said, we have a winner feature, we have a winner app, we have huge user base. Let's stop there. But they didn't. They recognized that user needs are incremental and are evolving and changing every day. So they constantly do research with users. And that's why user research is not optional. The companies and all product teams, they depend on it, and customer needs are always evolving. So we should not release features and stop there. The next myth is something that's commonly held in the tech world, which is data is king. Data is absolutely important and absolutely fundamental to the way we do work. However, some companies and some teams think that only data and statistical validation is enough for them to take decisions on. They think that if there is data evidence, then there is no need to do any qualitative studies or any qualitative research with the actual people that they are serving. There is no need to test with people or to talk to them if they have data evidence. Um, Let me share with you a story about that subject and why it is sometimes dangerous to rely only on data. During World War II, the United States Army looked at the amount of planes that's being lost to enemy fires. They knew that they needed to add armor to those planes, and the question was, where do we add the armor? Do we add it everywhere? However, that would make the planes slower and heavier, hence more susceptible to enemy fire. And that was the catch 22 that they were caught on in. Um, so they wanted to look at the data and rely on it to find where do they add that extra weight and that extra armor. So the researchers analyzed the planes returning from combat operations in Europe, and they looked at all the planes. They added the bullet holes to this model and looked at the data, bullet holes per square foot, and found out that the most bullet holes are in the wings part of the plane and in the fuselage, the main body. So they deduced that they concluded that it makes sense to add that extra armor on the wings and the fuselage. However, enter Mr. Abraham Walt, a brilliant mathematician who was part of that research group. And Walt stepped in with the main conclusion that was very surprising, saying the armor doesn't belong to the wings or the tail. The armor actually belongs to the engine, the least bullet holes. His insight was based on understanding that in the case of the US military, they were only studying the planes that came back from the combat. However, in that diagram, it actually shows the amount of bullet holes that planes can sustain and still fly back to the base. They completely neglected and they forgot to include the data from planes that didn't survive. Hence, he said, only the bullet holes in the least places are the ones that we should worry about and we should take care of. So that was just a small nugget or small story that can show us how data can sometimes be misleading or inconclusive. It's never alone to rely only on data to tell the full story. Sometimes we need to rely on multiple sources, and qualitative research with quantitative research, they complement each other and they definitely provide the full picture of any research study. So the next myth is slightly related to that previous one, which is we only research with loyal and returning users. So similar to what happened in World War II when the U.S. Army they didn't research everyone, they only researched with the survivors, which, by the way, the actual term for it is called survivorship bias. Some companies on this day they do the same thing. They only research with the most loyal and returning users. They recruit them, they talk to them, they analyze their data without looking at the bigger picture and the rest of the users out there. Sometimes they might open up to prospect and target users if they want to launch a new feature or service, but that's never enough. So, for example, many companies and global industry leaders have this unsubscribe to emailing list form, whether the form is organized and friendly, like in Tesla or Netflix example, or messy and unattractive in Apple and Amazon example. It doesn't matter. What matters is they are just allowing people to opt out without trying to learn why they are leaving and what they could do better and what they can gather from people before they leave. Mailship on the other hand, is doing this effort in the emailing comes with their users. They slightly have a better way to gather some data. They want to learn why people are trying to leave or opt out from their mailing lists. I think it's a better way to do it. However, the best way to do it, one of the best examples I've seen was by Jason Fried. He's the CEO of Basecamp, and he was just tweeting out there. He wanted to learn what people have stopped doing lately. And one of the people replied back saying, I stopped using Basecamp. And that was an insight for him. He wanted to learn qualitatively why that person decided to leave his product. And we keep seeing this example over and over from other CEOs like Elon Musk or Brian Chesky from Airbnb. They look at people before they leave the service, or the unhappy customers that want to leave the service or don't want to keep using the product that they are offering, and they wanted to learn from them what's not going well. Bill Gates summed it up brilliantly when he said that your most unhappy customers are your greatest source of learning. In our world, in the tech world and the UX world, we shouldn't only research with loyal users who are happy and loving our products. We should look at the people who are abandoning the products and stopping using it, not to try to bring them back, but rather to learn why they left in the first place. The next myth is about designers, and um, throughout the years, we keep seeing that designers sometimes think that they are capable of coming up with great designs without the need for user research. It's slightly true because they can come up with concepts. So similar to the car industry, the UI designers love to come up with beautifully looking shots, beautiful looking designs that belong to Dribble. Those futuristic designs and visual directions and concepts. They are looking stunning, and I appreciate that. It's absolutely mind-boggling what they do to reach that level of quality. However, by the end of the day, those shots remain as concepts. Those concepts can be found heavily on Medium or Dribble or Behance. There is absolutely no issue in creating those concepts and pushing the envelope and exploring those realms of visual design and visual interface work. However, there is a missing piece there. Um, what are they trying to achieve by those concepts? In reality, those are just concepts. It will remain there. They are trying to design things right, beautifully. Um, but are they tackling the right problems? There is a whole process before that, which is defining the right problems and defining what are the things that we need to design in the first place before designing it beautifully. Designers or the teams that are working on those concepts should first evaluate uh, if that's the right thing that for them to do. Only then they can move with confidence into designing the things right. However, it shouldn't stop there. They should measure how right was that thing. They should be able to see the impact of those concepts and the impact of those solutions for actual people's lives. How are they improving them? How are they satisfying their needs? And it's not a linear process, it's a cycle, because the more you learn and the more we measure how our interfaces are solving problems, how those products are impacting people's lives, the more we go into finding more problems, and then we come up with new designs and new concepts to solve those issues and measure them and so on. And at the end of it, that's the core of lean UX movement. This is how we do our work: iterative work, iterative design based on user insights and real research. So the end game is not to produce beautiful shots that live on a portfolio. The end game is to launch those designs to actual users and see and learn the impact and the success that we're doing for those users, and then iterate with confidence, of course. Victor Papanek, one of my favorite design heroes, said this statement in the 70s, and he's absolutely right back then, as much as he's right today. The only important thing about design is how it relates to people, not how it looks on Behance or Medium.com. The next myth is a very commonly held one. People think that user research is usability testing, and I don't blame them. Sometimes it's our fault that we frame usability testing as if it's the only user research activity that we should do or can do, but it's not. User research is much wider and bigger than this. There are two main categories of user research. There is quantitative research and qualitative research. And the quantitative research focuses on the how many and the how much answers of questions. We look at hard evidence, at data, and statistical significance to draw conclusions. While on the other side, qualitative research is focused on usability, focused on real users' insights and observations. They usually answer the why and the what of any research questions. And those two groups usually complement and inform each other. Like we mentioned before, data alone is not enough. And of course, qualitative usability testing or qualitative research is not enough on itself. Both of them inform each other. And when both of them intersect, it's heaven. It's real light bulb moments and real insights, because you keep seeing the thing happening from the qualitative side with observing people doing it or saying they need it, and seeing it with actual data, seeing how many people are using that product or using that service or needing that thing that we're building. So like we mentioned, usability testing is not the only user research activities. There is many more. Most common research activities is Google Analytics, when we check for data and hard evidence from the existing product. Heat maps analysis, looking at where people are clicking, how are they using the actual product or website. Doing A/B testing and split testing, how which one is better than which. Doing user surveys, launching it to a few sample groups, whether a matter of hundreds or thousands, that it doesn't matter, but it gives us that data confidence. And all those are quantitative user research activities. We sometimes do some information architecture testing, looking at card sorting, tree testing, looking how people are grouping things and how they are finding things in the website or in the app or in the product that we're doing. Then doing usability testing, some qualitative work, seeing what people are struggling with. Are they finishing the tasks that they are supposed to do? How are they using the features that we're launching? Sometimes we do user interviews and contextual inquiries to talk with users or observe them in the real environment. How are they using the product, or how are they going on in their daily lives, and how we can affect those daily lives. So we use multiple research activities to have the confidence and to have direction. It's not only usability testing, and of course, it's not only data or analytics or A/B testing. And that's the main takeaway here. User research is much broader than just doing usability testing, and everything that we do should complement each other, whether for a specific product that we have or products that we are conceiving. The next myth is something that's widely held by teams. They think that usability testing specifically is very expensive. It requires very hard to get equipments and complex process to do it. The thing is, it's not. All what we need is just having a participant in a testing room, just any conference room, with the devices that we are testing with, and link this testing room with through a camera or through any recording mechanism to an observation room where the rest of the team watches real time what people are saying and doing in these products. And of course, as a bonus, we should be able to do it remotely, especially in these times, very difficult times. Everything is remote at the moment. So it's not that difficult now with all this Zoom and GoToMeeting and Skype and Microsoft Teams. It's not that difficult to view things online and watch it in real time. At Tiger Spike, we use handful of devices, handful of tools to do it. It's not that expensive. It's not that big a deal in terms of process. All what we need is just a participant and the product we're testing, and why we're doing that test. We define the learning goals and what are we trying to achieve by that test, and we do it. Whether we do it in-house in our offices, whether we do it off-site or even remote, like what's going on right now in these times, it doesn't make a difference, and it's not that expensive or complex at all. This is something that's held in a lot of product teams, that usability testing is complex. It's not. It's straightforward, and we can always do it cheaply and effectively as well. The next myth is about focus groups. So sometimes we hear business owners or stakeholders talk about how their marketing team did a focus group, and people actually want this feature or want a specific thing to be fixed the way they want. There is no problem with focus groups per se. Talking to customers in general is better than not talking to them at all. However, the format of the focus group itself is imposing issues, and sometimes those issues are detrimental to the quality and the conclusiveness of the research output. For those who are not very familiar with focus groups, it's usually about getting 6 to 10 people to the office and putting them in a group discussion that's being moderated by one of the facilitators in the team. So I mentioned few issues that happen because of the format of focus groups. The first issue is usually groupthink. when you find participants agreeing with each other's opinion and they are talking in harmony about a specific feature or a specific thing that people perceive. Um, this this is a subconscious issue because people, it's called desirability bias. They want to be desirable. They don't want to go into conflicts with people, especially if they are strangers, and that issue affects the results of the focus group. Um, and the main thing here, if people are collectively talking in harmony about something specific, then they might be overriding and suppressing their individual needs and individual motivations and problems. And those are the actual insights that we're looking for when we're doing research. And if everyone is not arguing or at least talking about their needs, then we might have a missed opportunity. The other difficulty or issue with focus group is being solution focused. It's very difficult to uncover the underlying motivations and thoughts when people jump straight to fixing a problem. It's part of the human nature. And if the whole group is talking specifically about a specific solution, they might not be talking about the problem that this solution is addressing, which is actually why we're doing that research. We're trying to learn more about the problems and the needs and the preferences that people have so that we can find out the best solution that fulfills these needs. And if we jump straight to solutioning, it's another missed opportunity. One of the biggest issues in focus groups when you find conflicting opinions, a couple of strong-willed, opinionated people butt heads with each other. Their views are maybe at the far ends or far opposites of a specific spectrum, or they are not seeing eye to eye in a specific issue or a specific problem. Um, the problem with that is the rest of the group will just keep watching while those people argue or talk over each other, and the rest of the group might not have the will to express their opinion because they might be intimidated, and that strong opinionated people are overtaking the whole session, and it demotes the whole purpose of that user research. So it's always better to sometimes talk one to one with people because they will open up and they will speak freely without being intimidated by people who are talking around them. The last but not least, imagine if you only have one of those strong willed personalities and they are overtaking and steering the whole conversation of that focus group. It's becoming a focus group of one, basically. They would negate the views of the less articulate or more reserved people. Um, those more reserved or shy personalities might feel more comfortable opening up during one-to-ones, like I mentioned. Um, so, in general, having a large group format is problematic. Um, as I said, it's much better to talk to customers, but it's even better when we invest the time that are visiting us for an hour or two to go deeper and explore their individualistic needs and motivations. Mike Montero reflected about this in one of his iconic quotes. He said, "The only thing anyone's ever learned from a focus group is who the loudest person in the room is," which poses its factuality in reality. If you went into viewing a focus group or have seen one or facilitated one, most probably you might come across that problem. Um, so the next myth that I want to share is A/B testing. Sometimes teams think that it's the master savior for everything. You might hear a product manager saying, "We will do an A/B testing later when we go live. Let's just launch with this feature, and then we will enhance it later when we go live." It's like any captain of any ship who want to launch a ship prematurely while it's still being fixed and there are many holes in it. They don't care about those holes. They just want to ship it. However, when that ship was supposed to sail sinks, and people are looking at the captain saying, "Well, it didn't really fly. This feature didn't go well." They might say, well, we have learned something, we're going to enhance it, and we're going to do those enhancements using A/B testing. The reality of things is once the product is live, once it's shipped, it's too late to do major changes in the product or the strategy of that product. Um, A/B testing is fantastic when it's coming to smaller enhancements or minor improvements for that product. Testing multiple variations of a specific message or a specific button or some layout changes. However, when um, when we launch something, it's not straightforward to be fixed if it's a more strategic thing. So basically, it's like this this GIF. Because we're seeing something positive happening in the product, or even if we've done an A/B test variation that's working well, it doesn't mean that we're directly responsible for that to be working. Sometimes there are other factors like marketing or issues with competition, or undefined psychological needs that we haven't discovered yet it's working in the product. In other words, correlation doesn't imply causation. Just because it's happening, it doesn't mean that we are the ones responsible for it. And sometimes A/B testing doesn't tell you why it's happening. It tells you that it's successful, tells you that this variation works, but might not tell you that the reason for this to work is X, Y, Z. Let me play this snippet from a brilliant talk by Stuart Frisbee. I encourage all of you to watch it all. It will only take a minute. He's the former design director at Booking.com. He's been there for 8 years until he joined Deliveroo recently. And he reflected on why A/B testing is not a silver bullet for everything.
And perhaps the biggest frustration is you don't know why it failed. And that's really the biggest frustration I think I experience as someone who's done thousands of A/B tests is I don't know whether it was a bad idea. I don't know if it was a bad implementation. I don't know if it was a combination of those things. In most cases, it's probably my poor design skills. But you don't know. You just don't know. And that's a real frustration and something that I think people often look at A/B testing as a panacea for understanding users. And it really isn't a panacea. It's better than not knowing anything, but it certainly isn't even close to knowing everything. So for that reason, you have to keep spending money on research. You shouldn't take your research budget and throw it all into building a new A/B testing framework, because you need the two things. So at Booking.com, user research in the traditional sense is maybe applied a bit differently to it is in a traditional company. User research for us becomes an input into hypothesis generation rather than the output of a product development process. So you take a hypothesis or you take a group of hypotheses into a user testing session and you build data and you build opinions around why this hypothesis holds weight or doesn't hold weight. You give that back to the product development team and they build off that hypothesis, which then gets tested in an experiment.
So the main takeaway from this myth is A/B testing may tell us what works, but it will never tell us why it's working or how it could work better. We have to rely on more research, on different types of research to come up with those hypotheses and try multiple variations and see what works and what doesn't. Next myth is something that's close to my heart, and we all have seen it all the time with product managers and CEOs saying, I am the user. You do what I say, or I'm telling you what people need. You take it for granted and design for it. Um, it's going to be great if the CEO is the actual user, if he is part of the demographic that we're designing for. However, he's not the only user. There are many more, and he's not the only archetype or persona that we're designing for. Um, Unfortunately, the people who have the most influence over the user experience over have the least amount of contact with users. Um, so one study was mentioning that 80% of companies feel like they delivered a great experience to their customers. However, only 8% of their customers agree with them. So basically, teams and CEOs and businesses think that they have delivered a great product and their users must be happy. However, users are seeing something completely different from what those CEOs are seeing. And it's not something new. It's part of the human psychology. So there is something called the Dunning-Kruger effect, and it's basically a graph where confidence and knowledge intersect. So the more novice and the less knowledgeable you are, usually the more confident you are. So most people who think very strongly about their own assumptions, they might not know everything about that specific problem. So you will find people, once they reach that level of understanding or empathy, when they watch a real user using their product, sometimes they will say, okay, I was blind, now I can see, now I know what's wrong with the product. And their confidence will start to go down, because the more they see, the more they think they don't know enough, and they find out that there is more to it, and they keep iterating on it. If you've seen users using a specific product and you are doing usability testing, for example, every sprint, people, the confidence in their own assumptions, they will say, yes, I was wrong. I will never be able to grasp the knowledge about this specific issue. I want to do more research, up until the time when they find out that they are things are starting to make sense. Things are falling into place now, and they are getting more knowledge about that specific issue. So the knowledge curve will start to increase, but that's way after a lot of time. So the novices and people who are strong-willed, sometimes we need to be more empathetic to them and not take everything as a fact. We need to try to manage CEOs and manage business stakeholders, saying that you are not the user. How about you tag along in the next usability study? How about you watch this recording of how people are interacting, or doing hot jar recording for a few samples of users. Um, Darwin actually shared this quote about ignorance, and it's really tapping into that psychology. So ignorance more frequently begets confidence than knowledge. And I found this quotation perfectly sums up this chapter of I am the user. The next myth is user research happens only during discoveries. We think that we have a new epic to work on, or we are conceiving a new product, or we just landed a new project, and we do user research only during the discovery phase. However, there are many lenses of user research. So there is the exploratory research, which we need to look at the big picture, the unknown. What's the main jobs to be done of this specific product, or in general, what are the main needs for the market and for the user? And then we take that strategic lens for our research. We discover the main unmet needs, and we start define the problems. Um, at that time, there is no defined solutions yet. We are just figuring out from the bigger strategy what are the main things that we need to focus on. And then we move into the tactical research. So we come up with some solutions. We start exploring those solutions and researching or testing them against each other, and seeing how those solutions are answering the problems that we defined in our strategic research. And then the day-to-day operational research, which is basically to evaluate and optimize a specific solution. And that's where the A/B testing is. So A/B testing will not help us to figure out a strategy of a specific product, or the product market fit, or what underlying needs are. However, it's great operational improvement for doing that incremental enhancements for the product. So basically, the exploratory research is market focused, and then the strategic research is problem focused, and then the tactical research is solution focused, and operational research is optimization focused. And if you want to make it more definitive, this is more of the macro customer experience as a whole. That's the strategic lens. And the solution and optimization is more on the tactical user experience of that specific product. So, like we mentioned a few minutes ago, the most common user research activities, if we want to tag them as when to be used, of course, Google Analytics is a tactical in terms of data finding, and it's related to a specific product. Heat map, same thing. A/B testing, very tactical. User surveys can be used more on the strategic level of things. We can ask about users' preferences. We can use some behavioral questions. We talk with users about their specific needs in those surveys, so it can inform the strategy. Information architecture, of course, it's related to a specific product and its tactics. Usability testing is related to a product and its tactics. Both user interviews and contextual inquiries and field studies are more related on the strategy, why we're doing all what we're doing. And as you can see, some of those strategic researches can be undertook in the discovery phase, and the others will need a live product so that we can bring the data in and start analyzing those data. And some of them can be critical to validate new features or design concepts. So it depends on which part of the project or which part of the product delivery are we in, and what kind of the most meaningful user research activity we can take into that specific moment. So at the end of the day, we might find ourselves discovering and delivering within every sprint. So if we imagine every one of those lines is a specific sprint and we launch every couple of sprints, some sprints will have more discovery, some sprints will have more delivery. And that's usually called dual track agile. When we have two tracks, not two teams, not one team doing discovery and one team doing delivery. Ideally, the full team is discovering and delivering together. We're learning together and we're researching together as we go. It's a never ending cycle. So the main takeaway is research happening throughout the product lifecycle, from discovery to launch and beyond. So we are past the 10 myths, and I would love to summarize them quickly. As a quick reminder, research is not optional. Data is never and not always enough. Unhappy users can tell us more than happy users. Launch designs are much better than concepts that's living in portfolios. User research is more and definitely more wider than usability testing. Usability testing is not expensive. It's quite cheap and quite straightforward to conduct. Focus groups are not very effective and they have their own problems. And A/B testing on itself is not enough. It doesn't tell the full picture. And we are not the user, and definitely not the stakeholders or the product managers are the users, but the users are the users. And research happens throughout the product lifecycle, not only in discovery. So that's a wrap. Thank you very much. You've been kind listening to me, and please feel free to get in touch with me on Twitter or LinkedIn for any questions or further discussions. Cheers. Bye.